They tapped into my private well and used it to fill their infinity pool, and for a while they thought I would never notice. The only reason I did was because my horses started running out of water before noon. All I had to do in the end was turn a valve, but getting to that point changed the way I look at neighbors, property lines, and the quiet ways people justify crossing them. I live just outside a small town in western Montana, up a county road that turns from pavement to gravel about a mile before my mailbox. My place is nothing fancy, just under 40 acres I bought 15 years ago when land was still something a working guy could afford if he was willing to fix fences on weekends and eat a lot of beans and rice. There is a red barn that leans a little to the east, a modest 2-bedroom house my brother helped me frame, and behind the barn sits a squat concrete pump house that hums like a patient old dog. That pump house is the heart of everything out there. The well was drilled back in the late 70s, long before anyone thought about building luxury homes on the ridge above me. It runs deep, clean, steady. From that well, a buried main line feeds my house, my irrigation system, and the troughs for my horses and a handful of cattle I keep more for tradition than profit. The system was designed for predictable use: showers in the morning, sprinklers at dusk, livestock drinking through the day. It was not designed to suddenly supply a resort-style swimming pool. A couple years ago, the old timberland on the ridge sold to a developer from out of state. Word around town was he had plans to build custom homes for people who wanted mountain views without actually living like mountain people. I did not pay much attention at first. I have always believed that if a man pays for his land fair and square, he has a right to build on it. I just hoped whoever moved in would understand that country living comes with dust, wind, and the occasional smell of manure. The first house went up fast. Steel beams, floor-to-ceiling glass, flat roof lines that looked like they belonged in Arizona more than Montana. The new owners moved in late spring. His name was Victor Langford, retired tech executive from California, or so I heard at the feed store. His wife, Danielle, had a way of looking at people like she was mentally redesigning them. I met them once, briefly, at the property line when they were walking their dog. Victor stuck out his hand and said, "You must be the guy with the well down there." I remember that because it struck me as an odd way to introduce yourself to a neighbor, like I was less a person and more an infrastructure feature. "Yeah, that would be me," I said. "Caleb Mercer." He smiled, quick and polished. "Good to meet you, Caleb. We're trying to get a feel for the utilities around here." Fascinating stuff. Utilities. I told him most folks out here were on wells and septic, nothing complicated. He nodded, but kept glancing past me toward the barn, toward the pump house. At the time, I chalked it up to curiosity. People from the city are often amazed that water does not just appear when you twist a chrome handle. Construction on their backyard started midsummer. Terraces cut into the hillside, stone retaining walls, truck after truck hauling materials up that narrow road. Then I saw the rebar outline of what was clearly going to be a big pool, the kind you see in real estate brochures with the words Infinity Edge in elegant script. It hung right at the lip of the ridge, pointed straight out over the valley. I remember standing at my fence one evening, watching the sunset hit that half-built concrete shell, thinking it looked like a spaceship had landed on a cattle pasture. About a week after they started landscaping, I noticed the first change. My shower pressure dipped around lunchtime. Not gone, just weaker, like someone else in the house had turned on a faucet. Only there was no one else in the house. I live alone, unless you count a blue heeler named Rusty who has never shown much interest in indoor plumbing. At first I blamed sediment. Wells can get a little finicky when the seasons shift. I checked the pressure tank in the pump house, listened to the pump cycle. Everything sounded normal. The gauge read where it always had. But the pattern kept repeating. Strong pressure early in the morning. By early afternoon it would sag. My irrigation sprinklers started sputtering, sending out uneven arcs of water instead of steady fans. One afternoon I found the horse trough half empty at 3 o'clock, which had never happened unless I forgot to check it. That is when something in my gut tightened. I have worked with water systems long enough to know that when equipment checks out but performance drops, the problem is usually demand. Somebody, somewhere, is pulling more than they should. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. It is easy to resent the folks up the hill with their glass walls and imported stone. Easy to blame them for anything that goes wrong. Still, the timing was hard to ignore. Every day the pressure dipped right when the sun was high, right when a new concrete pool would need water to cure, or later, to fill. One afternoon, After finding the cattle trough slower than usual again, I shut off the sprinklers and started walking the property line that runs along the base of the ridge. My main supply line runs underground not far from that boundary, about 3 feet down, installed years before I ever met Victor Langford. There is a certain look to freshly disturbed soil, even when someone tries to smooth it over. The earth is looser, slightly darker. About 100 yards along the fence, I saw a stretch of ground that did not sit right. The grass had been tamped back down, but not fully rooted. A narrow trench, maybe 6 inches wide, ran parallel to my line before angling uphill. My pulse picked up, slow but heavy. I stepped over the fence and crouched near a clump of brush just inside my side of the boundary. That is when I saw it, a small green utility box half hidden behind some rocks. I had never put a box there. I do not like extra hardware cluttering my land. For a minute, I just stared at it, feeling that mix of disbelief and anger you get when something you half suspected starts to become real. I reached down, brushed away some loose dirt, and lifted the lid. Inside was a T-fitting spliced directly into my main water line. PVC branching off clean and deliberate, running uphill toward the Langford property. They had not just borrowed a hose. They had cut into my private well line. And standing there in the heat, with the smell of dry grass and diesel from their construction trucks drifting down the ridge, I realized this was no misunderstanding. This was a decision. I did not touch anything at first. That is the part one I'm still proud of. My first instinct was to rip the whole mess out of the ground, drag that illegal line up the hill like a dead snake, and dump it on Victor Langford's polished concrete driveway. But instinct is not always strategy, and I have learned the hard way that when you are in the right, the smartest thing you can do is slow down. So I took pictures. Lots of them. Close-ups of the T-fitting, wide shots showing the fence line, shots with my boot next to the pipe for scale. I even recorded a short video, narrating the date and time like I had seen on crime shows. The whole time my hands were steady, which surprised me, because inside I felt something between betrayal and insult. They had not asked. They had not even tried to negotiate. They had simply decided my water was theirs to use. That night, I called my attorney, a woman named Sandra Ellis who lives in town and does everything from land disputes to wills. I told her what I found, and there was a long pause on the line. "Caleb," she said finally, "do not confront them directly. Not yet. That is theft of utility service at minimum, possibly criminal tampering. We are going to document everything and notify the county." I asked her what would happen. "Best case," she said, "they remove it, pay fines, and you are done. Worst case, it gets ugly." "Ugly how?" She exhaled slowly. "People with money do not like being told no." The next morning, I called the county water authority and filed a complaint. The woman who answered sounded bored at first, like she expected another dispute about sprinkler runoff. That changed when I explained it was a private well line that had been physically spliced without permission. She said, "We will send an inspector." Before any official truck rolled up my driveway, though, I had an immediate problem. They were still pulling water. Every afternoon, my pressure dipped. Every afternoon, my pump worked harder than it should. I walked out to the pump house around noon, Rusty trotting behind me, and stood there listening to the motor hum. The main shutoff valve sits just beyond the pressure tank, a heavy brass wheel installed decades ago. Downstream from that, the line splits underground toward the house and across the field. I studied the layout in my head. The illegal branch was installed farther down the line, closer to the property boundary, which meant if I adjusted the flow before that point, anything beyond it would feel the change. I did not want to shut my water off entirely. That would hurt my own house and livestock. But there was a bypass line, originally installed for maintenance, that allowed me to reroute supply directly to the house and trough system while limiting flow toward the outer field. I turned the main valve halfway closed, slow and controlled, listening as the pitch of the pump shifted. Then I opened the bypass fully, isolating the far stretch where their illegal T-connection sat. It was not sabotage. It was simply reclaiming control of my own system. By late afternoon, my indoor pressure was steady again. The sprinklers ran clean arcs. The horse trough filled the way it always had. Whatever was happening uphill, I knew they were not getting much from me anymore. Around 5:30 that evening, I saw a white pickup crawl down the ridge road and stop near my fence. A man in a contractor's vest stepped out, clipboard in hand. He looked uneasy before he even spoke. "Afternoon," he called. "You Caleb?" "That depends," I said. wiping my hands on a rag. We are working up at the Langford place. They are having some kind of water pressure issue. Pool autofill is not engaging properly. Just wanted to check if you noticed anything strange with the shared line. There is no shared line, I said evenly. He shifted his weight. Well, we tied into an existing supply that runs near the boundary. Thought maybe it fed multiple properties. I let the silence stretch a little too long. You tied into my private well line, I said. Without permission. Without easement. Without even a conversation. His face drained of color. I just do what I am told, man. I walked back to the barn and came out with printed photos. I had already run them off that afternoon at the small print shop in town. I handed them to him one by one. You might want to show these to whoever told you to do that. He studied the images, jaw tight. This is going to be a problem, he muttered. It already is, I replied. He left without another word. The following day, Victor himself drove down in a sleek black SUV, dust curling behind him like an afterthought. He stepped out wearing sunglasses and that same polished smile, though it did not reach his eyes this time. Caleb, he said, we seem to have a small misunderstanding. I crossed my arms. Do we? He walked closer, glancing toward the pump house. The contractors may have assumed that line was a redundant agricultural supply. There was no malicious intent. You cut into a buried pipe on my land, I said. That is not an assumption. That is action. He removed his sunglasses slowly. Look, running a separate municipal connection up that ridge is costly and time-consuming. We were told your well had capacity. We would have compensated you, of course. Would have, I repeated. After the fact. His jaw flexed. We did not anticipate this level of resistance. That word hung between us. Resistance. I am not resisting, Victor. I am protecting what is mine. For a moment his mask slipped, and I saw irritation, maybe even disbelief that someone in a faded work shirt was not immediately impressed by his position. You realize this could become a lengthy legal matter, he said. It already is, I answered. I have counsel involved. So does the county. That got his attention. 2 days later, a county inspection truck rolled up my driveway. The inspector, a broad-shouldered man named Hank Rodriguez, walked the boundary with me and examined the splice. He shook his head before he even finished measuring. No permit, no easement, no inspection, he said. This is about as clear-cut as it gets. He documented everything and then drove up the ridge. I could not hear the conversation from my place, but I saw hand gestures. Sharp ones. By the end of the week, the county issued a formal notice of violation. Unauthorized tapping of a private well line. Unpermitted plumbing work. Trespass. They were ordered to remove the branch immediately and restore my line under supervision. The day they reopened the trench, I stood at my fence again. Different contractor this time. More cautious. They cut the illegal branch clean, removed every inch of pipe leading uphill, and replaced the section of my main line with new PVC, properly sealed and pressure tested. Hank himself checked the gauges at my pump house when they were done. You are good, he said. No leaks. Pressure is steady. That evening my system ran as smooth as it had before any of this started. The hum in the pump house sounded like relief. I wish I could say that was the end of it, that justice served was enough. But what stayed with me was not the fine they paid or the cost of installing a new municipal line to their property. It was the look on Victor's face when he realized he could not simply absorb my resources into his lifestyle. For weeks after, we did not speak. Then one evening, as the sun dipped low and turned the ridge gold, I saw their pool for the first time filled properly, water spilling over the infinity edge, reflecting the sky like nothing had ever happened. It was beautiful, I will give them that. But it was no longer running on my well. And here's the part that still sits with me. They believed no one would trace a pressure drop. They believed rural meant unsophisticated. They believed a quiet neighbor would stay quiet. All it really took was turning a valve. For a while after the county wrapped things up, the ridge went quiet again. No more backhoes chewing at the hillside. No more contractors pacing along my fence line pretending not to look down toward the barn. Just wind through dry grass, the low murmur of my pump house doing what it had always done, and Rusty barking at shadows like he was guarding a kingdom. On paper, it was over. The illegal line was gone. The county fines were paid. Victor and Danielle had a brand new municipal connection drilled and trenched all the way up the ridge at a cost I later heard was well into 6 figures. Their infinity pool filled the way it was supposed to, from a properly metered, permitted source. My well supplied exactly what it was built to supply. Nothing more. But if you have ever lived in a small community, you know paper endings are not the same as human endings. Word got around town fast. It always does. By the next Saturday, I could not walk into Miller's Feed and Grain without someone clapping me on the back. Heard you shut down the billionaire's bathtub, one guy joked. I just smiled and bought my hay. Some folks treated it like a victory for the little guy. Others quietly wondered if I had overreacted. After all, they said, maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe the contractors cut corners without Victor fully knowing. And that is the part that kept me up a few nights, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles in the dark. Was it possible he truly did not understand what his crew had done? I replayed that first conversation at the fence in my head. You must be the guy with the well down there. He knew. He knew exactly where the water was coming from. About a month after everything was fixed, Victor came down again. No SUV this time. He walked. I was repairing a section of fence near the road when I saw him approaching, hands in his pockets, posture less rigid than before. Caleb, he called out. I leaned against the post driver and waited. I wanted to talk, he said when he got close enough. No lawyers. Just neighbors. I did not invite him to sit, but I did not tell him to leave either. He looked different without the sunglasses and tailored jacket. Just a man in jeans and boots that had clearly never seen mud until recently. I miscalculated, he said finally. In the corporate world, if you need something, you acquire it. You pay for it, you optimize it. Out here, I assumed capacity was the same as availability. That is a fancy way of saying you took something that was not yours, I replied. He nodded once. Fair. There was a long pause between us, filled with wind and distant cattle lowing. Do you know why I built that pool? He asked. Because you could, I said. A small smile. Partly. Danielle wanted something that made this place feel like a reward. We spent decades working 60, 70-hour weeks. That view up there. It was supposed to mean we had finally arrived. Arrived where, I wondered, but I did not say it. He continued, I saw your well as excess supply. An underutilized asset. I did not think about the principle of it. About asking. About respect. Respect. That word carried more weight than any legal notice. I rested my hands on the fence post and looked up at the ridge where the glass house caught the sun. When you live out here, I said, your well is not just plumbing. It is security. It is independence. If that pump fails, I do not shower. My animals do not drink. It is not decorative. He listened without interrupting. When the pressure dropped, I went straight to thinking something was wrong with my system. I continued. I blamed myself. Spent hours checking equipment, that was never the problem. That is what bothered me most. Not the water. The assumption that you did not need to involve me. He nodded again, slower this time. I cannot undo that, he said. But I can apologize. It was not dramatic. No handshake yet. Just a simple statement that felt more real than any polished smile he had offered before. I appreciate that, I said. We stood there another minute. Two men from very different worlds connected by a buried pipe that no longer joined our properties. Before he left, he added, for what it is worth, the municipal line cost more than the pool itself. Danielle was not thrilled. I almost laughed. Almost. Well, I said, at least now when you look at that water, you will know exactly where it comes from. He gave a short chuckle and started back up the hill. After that, things settled into an uneasy but functional peace. We were not friends. We were not enemies. We were simply neighbors who understood the line between us a little more clearly. Every now and then, usually at sunset, I will catch a glimpse of that infinity pool shimmering at the edge of the ridge. It does look like something out of a magazine, water blending into sky, mountains reflecting on its surface. Sometimes I imagine what would have happened if I had said nothing. If I had convinced myself it was easier to let it slide. Maybe the pressure drops would have gotten worse. Maybe my pump would have burned out early from overwork. Maybe resentment would have built quietly until it spilled out sideways in some other way. Instead, all it took was turning a valve and being willing to stand behind that decision. Here is the thing, though, and this is where I am still not entirely sure how to feel. Victor did wrong. There is no debating that. Cutting into someone's private well line is not a gray area. It is a bright red one. But part of me wonders how many times we all treat other people's resources like they are background infrastructure. Time, patience, land, water. We see capacity and assume permission. I defended my boundary because if I did not, no one else would. Out here, there is no HOA coming to enforce fairness. No shared utility board smoothing things over. There is just what is yours and what is not. But I also saw something shift in him that day by the fence. Maybe consequences do not just punish. Maybe they clarify. So now I am curious what you think. If you were in my boots, would you have handled it the same way, quietly gathering evidence and then cutting off the flow without a warning? Or would you have marched up that ridge the moment you found the splice and demanded an explanation face to face? Do you think someone like Victor deserved a chance to ask first, even after he already crossed the line? Or was turning that valve the only language he was ever going to understand? Out here, water is life. Boundaries matter. But so do the conversations we avoid until something breaks. Let me know where you stand. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this justice, pettiness, or just a man protecting what he built with his own hands? I read every comment, and I genuinely want to know how you would have played it. Because sometimes the biggest conflicts are not about water at all. They are about respect.